Spoilers for Elbaf, but we recently had a video talking about how I think Biblo, the giant owl within the owl library on Elbaf, is actually the ancient weapon Uranus. We also talked about how I think Biblo is Loki's opposite, and his visage is on the mural that we see in chapter 1138, but it's most likely being blocked by Frankie, as the camera view is actually behind Frankie. So, in addition to this, I just wanted to talk about how ridiculous Biblo might be based on what we've seen so far and based on other characters with similar powers. So Biblo is the first Paramecia type Delphi user in the series to be an animal. What's also quite interesting about Biblo, based on what Saul says about him, is that he could be the oldest Delphi user in the series to date, as he is centuries old. No other Paramecia type Delphi user, or Delphi user in general for that matter, as far as we know as of this recording, is centuries old. However, Biblo has the power of the Grow fruit, which allows him to increase the size of inanimate objects. He uses this on literature in order to make it big enough for giants to read. But with that being said, his abilities are very similar to other Delphi powers that we've seen before in the series, like Diamante's Ripple fruit, or Gladius's Pop fruit, or even Shiki's Float fruit, in which he can affect only inanimate objects in a particular way. With that being said, the interesting caveat about abilities like this is that they are all basically lies, because the description of the ability is that they can only affect inanimate objects in a particular way. However, when it comes to affecting people, they can affect people. It's just that they are the only person that they can affect. So we know that Diamante can turn himself into a flag. We know that Gladius can make himself explode, and we know that Shiki can make himself fly. So this could be the case for Biblo as well, which means that even though Biblo is now Bathian Owl as far as we know, and he is giant, he could become even bigger, possibly bigger than the user of the huge fruit, Sanwan Wolf of the Blackbeard Pirates, meaning that Biblo himself could be the biggest entity in One Piece, potentially. But in addition, before we start breaking things down and really expressing how terrifying Biblo is, let me put this forward. Is Biblo an awakened Paramecia fruit user? I ask this because Biblo doesn't touch anything in order to make it grow. He simply has an area of effect, and anything within that area of effect simply grows. This is new. And I don't think this is just an ability of the fruit. I think Biblo is an awakened Paramecia, because abilities like Biblo's that we've seen before in the past often require touch. Diamante needs to touch something in order to make it ripple like a flag. Shiki needs to touch something in order to make it float. Gladius needs to touch something in order to make it pop. So, seeing as how Biblo doesn't need to touch anything could mean that he is an awakened Paramecia, and awakened Paramecias of this type could just all have this area of effect ability in which anything in their line of sight or field of effect can just be affected by their ability, which is a very interesting idea and could be a reveal for how powers are going to work in the future if they're very similar to Biblo's. Now, this is also very sensible when you consider that Biblo is potentially one of the oldest Delphi users in the series so far, seeing as how he is centuries old. So it would make sense for him to have awakened his Delphi if he has had it for literal centuries. Now, with that being said, let's break down what we have so far. So we don't know what kind of owl Biblo is based off of, but we do know that some owls have the ability to fly through the air silently. And owls are birds of prey. So you have a giant bird of prey that can fly through the air silently. Now, when you consider the powers of the Grow fruit and what powers the Grow fruit might have based off of other abilities with similar effects, this could mean that Biblo is a giant bird of prey that can fly through the air silently, that can grow infinitely larger than he is now, because unlike the huge fruit, there's no set upper limit for how big the Grow fruit can make things. This is why I think Biblo could indeed be the ancient weapon Uranus, because you now have a giant bird of prey that can get bigger, that can fly through the air silently, and on top of that is potentially an awakened Paramecia who can make things bigger within an area of effect. So, a giant could perhaps make a bomb. That bomb could get infinitely larger under the influence of Biblo, and then Biblo silently flies over an enemy country and then drops the bomb, making that bomb infinitely larger than it was originally, making the explosion infinitely more devastating potentially. This is why Biblo very much could be the ancient weapon Uranus, because the potential for destruction that Biblo has is quite ridiculous. It's putting me in the same frame of mind like how the Mother Flame was set up, because he's something that can appear potentially at a moment's notice and then cause island-wide destruction on a mass scale that could potentially sink an island based on what he has been equipped with. So it's just really interesting as to what Biblo is and what he could potentially be if he's given more lore. And I think he will be as we move forward through Elbaf. But yes, I still think he is the ancient weapon Uranus. So with that being said, if you are enjoying the video so far, click the like button. And if you want to see more of this content here, click the subscribe button and don't forget to ring that bell so you never miss a video. And if you can, please click the hype button because it helps somehow. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Woods.